Today on Crushing Doubt, I'm going to be joined by Philippe. He is a patient of mine who I've seen, and he has a lot of experience with Sarno in general, getting better from pain, but he's also going to share his experiences growing in the power department. So I look forward to talking to him. If you haven't already, click subscribe, hit like, and ring the bell for notifications, and put your comments below. Philippe, I'm so glad you could join us on the show. And I'm very excited to talk with you about your experience, because that's what we do here. We talk about who's been through what and how did it go and all of that. And you've had a really interesting journey. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you came across me in the first place, and even just the mind body idea in the first place, because I think you had come across it before you came across me.
Well, it's good to see you, and thanks for having me on.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I came across you was through Eddy's podcast, the Mind and Fitness podcast. So shout out to Eddy. Lichten, was it his last name?
Lindenstein. Yep.
Lindenstein.
Eddy Lindenstein.
Yeah, shout out to him. That was fun, and I really resonated with what you said, and especially how you said it. It was a very compassionate, and also it was someone who I could relate to. So that's how I came across your work. I've already been a big Sarno fan, devotee, you could say, for a few years, and I'd had a lot of um, resolution of a lot of pain through reading Sarno. But there was the reason why I reached out to you is because I had this one stubborn thing that wasn't going away, and despite being very, yeah, I attributed it immediately to a mind body process, but it just wouldn't go away, And I didn't take it for much, and what do you call it? I challenged it, I just kept on as I would, but just stuck around. And I thought, you know what, I should probably talk to someone with a degree or something like that.
So what was it that you heard on Eddy's podcast about the way I talked about it that made you want to reach out?
I can't remember the specifics. I just know you like basketball and I like basketball, so that was probably something
That's my
that helped.
secret.
Yeah, so basketball helped. You're a man who's also very had a soft side, and I guess that something I have as well. That that's great, but can also be challenging, So I liked how you brought those things up, and you were just very honest, bringing up your personal experiences that I found some of the other maybe practitioners didn't bring up, their own personal experiences.
Right. So, first of all, I appreciate what you're saying, and about how I work. It feels good to hear, but it's also a sign of something important that maybe we can say to the viewers out there as we're talking about this, that it really is important to feel that connection with who you're working with, and that was important to you to feel safe enough to come and talk to me about these things. And I'm glad you did, and we felt that connection right away.
Oh yeah.
We got in there and it
Yeah,
just felt really good.
alley-oop, right? A three ball and
Boom.
smash.
So, okay, now can you touch base a little bit on the symptoms you had managed through Sarno
Mhm.
even before you came to see me? Because I want to give a sense to the viewers what you had been through and what the success was that you had.
So last night I couldn't sleep because I was so excited for being on your podcast. Just first of all, I might be rambling here. I'm so excited, but I'm thinking about how to, because I knew this question was going to come up. So how do I answer this question? And in my own dealing with the mind body process, I've started to reframe it with the emotions first versus the physical symptom first. So if you don't mind, I'll bring it up like that. So
Yeah.
um, I've been brought up to be very good. I've been a goodist and a perfectionist. So those are very strong traits in me that are hard to shake, and you could say impossible to shake. And then I've also had a lot of guilt built into the cake of how I've been raised. So those have manifested themselves into the into the physical conditions I've had. So and I think a lot of that was pressure too, parental, and a lack of. I think this is what's lacking sometimes in what, not necessarily lacking, but missing. Let's say is the lack of the scale. Let's say there's all these stressors, but there's no antithesis to that. There's no pleasures, right? So maybe the lack of friendships and
Yeah.
freedom, so on. So when things really boiled over and I was in a really bad state was it was around the end of university. And university, I was already doing something I knew I didn't want to do. I was in a field, I was in graphic design. I knew I didn't want to do it from day one when I went to school orientation. Did it. There's a lot of pressure. Just finish university, just get a degree. Then I went to the first job, and I'd already been having a lot of pain by then, back pain. And but I didn't trust myself to get out of this career path. You know, I felt like I needed permission to
Hmm.
leave from my parents or so on. Um, so that led to the pain, the very very severe pain that I had. And I mean, anyone listening here, I don't think I need to describe the pain. It's like if you're here listening, you know what it's like. So I'd rather stick to maybe more the emotional stuff, because I feel like that sometimes isn't addressed by the people talking about their recovery stories.
Right, right. No, and that is really important, and it's wonderful to hear that you were able to understand your emotions, get in touch with them, and I would say that your body was communicating that to you, and you received that message. And in receiving the message, it does sound like you were then able to translate it back into emotion more,
It took
and some of
13
those symptoms
years.
left.
It took like 13 years for me to accept that, to even
Mhm.
think that it could be. I mean, originally my aunt, who's a homeopath and acupuncturist, she said, I was given a diagnosis of ankylosing spondylitis, which, to me was the end of the world, right? And she said, you don't need to take that very seriously. That's just live your life, And I was like, this lady's crazy. She's into like weird droppy things and needles. And what does she know, right? And then it took me whatever 10, 13 years before I got this Sarno book with a guy who's he's not a out there weirdo. He's got a lab coat, and he's a rational person, for me to accept that.
Mhm.
And I felt, I could have been free of this if I had just, been a bit more open to what my aunt was saying.
Well, it's really resonating what you're saying too, because I was always open to all kinds of things, but it really helped me that Dr. Sarno was an MD,
Hmm.
came from a scientific background. He talked about the physiology of things. It made a big difference. And now, I'm a psychologist, so I don't have that same weight that he brings, but I bring him with me. And, when it comes to the medical side of things, I bring him with me. I bring Dr. Hanscom with me. I bring Dr. Schechter with me, Dr. Schubiner, all these people who have continued his path on the medical side. They're by my side as I go along with this, and I have come to understand what the physiology is. And so, even though it took you a while, you did get there. And one thing that I'm hearing is that the messenger really does matter.
Hmm.
It's
Absolutely.
yeah.
We're conditioned to trust authority figures, and since childhood, and through school, through doctors, through the police. And if someone who doesn't fit, an authority figure starts telling you, well, it's because of uh, your relationship with your uh, I don't know, your parents, or your friendships, or your romances, or whatever, if it's not coming from an authority figure, this credible authority, then it's hard to accept, for those of us who've been so conditioned, and we all have been. And that's what takes so long, unfortunately. And that's where you really have to give it up to Sarno and people like you, who are going against what is let's say the what would you call it, the mainstream, this idea that's being defended, about
Mm-hmm.
how our body works, that it's all very chemical and structural.
Yeah, we're going against societal norms, but I was just talking to somebody today about the fact, and she was like, "Well, how can you be so sure about what it is that you're saying?" And I was like, "The reason I can be so sure is it's like I'm trying to tell you that gravity exists." So we're going against a societal norm that's arguing that gravity doesn't exist. It's a
Mhm.
pretty weird situation, and I think I'm I feel that it is part of my role to charge into that and be definitive and clear that we don't need to be confused about things like gravity. We don't. This is science and logic that we're dealing with here. And once it hit you that way, I can hear how it changed. But I want to pivot to something that went on when you and I started meeting, at least as far as I could tell, which is one of the things we talked about that I think you and I both found to be really important was the idea of personal power.
Mhm. Yes.
I remember that really resonating with you, and I can even see how it's played out. I mean, since we've talked, you have shifted some things. And I'm not saying that to take credit myself. It was a discussion that worked well for you and had good synergy with where you were headed anyway. But I do think your personal power was on the rise when you came to talk to me. I think it's even part of the reason you reached out in the first place in one of the messages I was saying. But I wondered if you could talk about what you remember about our meetings and what, not even about the meetings, but what's happened since for you with respect to power.
But on a general level, or in a, I've, how do I explain this without getting too far down the rabbit hole? But our personal power is undermined all the time. Our personal autonomy and our choices, our freedoms, and it begins in childhood. And the kinds of freedoms and the decisions that we're allowed to have, let's say, as a child, are so limited compared to and the decisions and the autonomy that a child growing up in a hunter-gatherer society has. And that, when one understands that, um, when one has an understanding of human life in a hunter-gatherer setting and environment, one can look at what the conditions we're in and see how much we're repressed and how much we're made to feel powerless and fearful. And school doesn't help. School, policing, all these things make you feel like afraid, and the pressure to succeed and the pressure to satisfy other people's expectations, those can make you feel very powerless. And now, personally, to me, I mean, those things are definitely true of myself. And that is probably the most important thing that I've come to realize about, where what has been causing the physical pain symptoms, and beyond that is preventing me from being myself, is just using, or like believing in oneself, accepting that one's own power, one's assertiveness to assert oneself into the world, right? I,
You're saying it really well. You may be
I
having
hope
some
so.
doubts, but I help people not have doubts. So I'm going to
Well,
come in and say you're doing great.
language is tricky, right? Because we're just using symbols to communicate these feelings and ideas. But that's what I like about you, is we have a telepathic connection potentially.
Right. I could see you having the doubt. So, Philippe, what I was thinking here was whether you got it in part from me or not from me at all doesn't matter. What matters, I think, is more that you got it from your body. When we were looking at the symptoms, you had that stubborn symptom with your foot.
Yes.
And we were talking about the fact that it was immobilizing you. And then we talked about how you were having feelings about moving forward in your life or where to go next. And we connected to that power idea. And I actually don't remember what happened before you met with me or what happened during that or even what happened after, because we had some follow-up. But I know that you were on a trajectory of recognizing that your body was talking to you about whether you were feeling powerful, whether you were feeling free of all of those authority figures that rattle around in our minds. And one thing I'm really excited to hear about is you've taken things in a direction that clearly comes from the heart, from something you are believing in, and it also relates to the mind body work, and that is you've started getting into this whole idea of the hunter gatherer and the physiology of those societies. And I understand you have a podcast now.
That's right. That's right. So it's been something that I've been the subject has interested me for since first year university, and I'd say even before that, before I knew of the field or the genre, people's living in different cultures always interested me. But then the understanding that there's a sort of way to group humans by their economic orientation, so hunting and gathering being one. And that was in first year anthropology, a class that I took, and I've since then I've just taken in a lot of information, and I've had so many discussions with people who want to tell me about human nature, uh, just because they've had, just because they're alive, and that's granted, that's great, but their only experience of being alive is within a system where you have to pay taxes and you have to go to school and you have to please your parents and you have to drive drive on the right hand side of the road, and all these things are very uh, these things create the conditions that cause a lot of grief and strife and in our lives. So if we're talking about human nature, we also have to look at humans um, as they live, as we live, um, in a different setting where there's no hierarchy, there's no gender inequality, um, there's no taxes, there's no property, and conflict resolution is done very simply by just moving apart. So a lot of the conflicts and strife and expectations we have is because we're just stuck in one place. But anyway, back to bring it, I have started a podcast about it, and yeah, it felt powerful doing it, and I have to thank you. You've definitely been a part of that process.
Well, I appreciate that credit, but to throw it back to you, you unlocked that in yourself. I mean, I encouraged it and I support it, and I'm behind you on it, but so's your body. And your whole physiology was pushing towards something like this. And it's a great pleasure to see you moving in that direction. What's the podcast called, and where can it be found?
It's called there's no but it's called Hunter Gatherers Podcast, or just Hunter Gatherers. You can find it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Yeah.
Great. So for the people out there listening, you got a new podcast to check out, and it's one that is mind body informed. And
Absolutely.
and it makes a really key point that I want to give you credit for how you're thinking, which is, and this is very in line with how you were thinking from the minute you talked to me, so you definitely didn't get this from me. You have a uniqueness that you were bringing to the table, and I think it helped you that I appreciated that uniqueness. I was like, yeah, I like this. um and that changes your physiology in the opposite way that it's changed when an authority figure doesn't believe in us or gives us a structure that we feel that we're locked into. And I know that was a big deal for you to feel really locked into a structure where you couldn't find your way out. And it affected your whole physiology. And now, I mean, I can even see a difference in you. Just I can't even describe what it is, but looking at you physically, you look happier.
Well,
And
that's good. I don't know if I feel much happier lately, but
well, I don't know. I'm not even describing how your mental state would be. I'm talking about your physiology.
okay,
Your physiology looks just like energized. That's a better way of putting it. Maybe not happier, but energized.
that's good.
That is a better way of putting it. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, in motion, right? Making decisions, decisive. And I think that comes back to power. I definitely
Mhm.
feel that way more. Like, let's just pull the trigger here. Let's make a decision, right? And trust
Yeah.
yourself to be able to adjust to whatever happens. Was I right? Was I wrong? Well, it doesn't matter. The point was make the decision from what felt right to you. That's where I think that's what power is. I made a few notes. I don't know. There's one thing I really wanted to mention. People often say like confidence, right? People bring up confidence, and your show is about doubt. And I mean, the other side of the coin is confidence. So like people say, just be confident. Well, how do you be confident? And to me, confidence you could define as knowing that an outcome is likely from what you're going to do. So as a person who's had a lot of doubt, I had to accept that I'm going to have to do things while being in doubt, in a state of doubt.
Yeah.
I can't wait for confidence to come. So I'm just going to have to do it with doubt. And then eventually confidence happens.
Yeah, well, that's a very good and key point. And I have said this to many people as this podcast has been moving forward. The name Crushing Doubt came from the double meaning it has. So I don't expect people to come in with no doubt. Precisely the opposite. You can't crush doubt until you let it in. And I think you have done a very nice job of letting in your doubts and grappling with them, but being able to move forward anyway. So absolutely. This process of getting better that I work with people on, they never get better. They never resolve all of their doubts before they get better. That's not the way it works. The way it works is we resolve maybe one or two doubts, and then it starts to get a little bit better, and it starts to creep up in your confidence. And eventually you get to a place where you feel like you are a master over those symptoms. And it takes time. And I can even get knocked back myself, and think, oh, this one's really stubborn. I don't know why this is. So our confidence level can go up and down, but the trajectory going up and up and up as we work on these things can really set people free. And I'm glad we hit on that idea of it's not really happiness, it's energized. That I'm glad you caught that, because that's what I was seeing. The excitement of doing something you believe in and being fully you. And I think your body really got you to this part of the process. And if we continue to follow the wisdom of the body, we go where we want to go. And so this is one of the joys that we had meeting right from the start. We're both energized about these things. And I want to thank you for coming on and sharing this story. And, I'd love to have you back too, because I know this is going to be an unfolding process for you, and you'll have more to say about this. I know you do have more to say about it because I know you. You got plenty to say. So I can't wait to hear more, but I loved getting to highlight your story for people, because I think it's an incredibly important one that shows what happens when you listen to your body and you start to become powerful. Even if you're not as confident as you want to be, and even if you still have doubts, yes, you're right. You can make progress even while having doubt. So I really want to thank you for coming on, and I hope you will come back soon.
Thank you. I know I absolutely would. Maybe I could just leave with one thought, and that is to anyone listening who's considering this, just be open to it. You have nothing to lose. You have nothing to lose. So just take a day, say I'm just going to imagine this is real. You got nothing to lose before you do the surgery, before you take the pills and so on. Just give it a shot.
It's a great message, and I appreciate you saying it, because it's nice to have it not always come from me. But I think you're right. I think that if you give it a shot, this is really about science and logic. So it's really just a bunch of conversations. And if it starts to add up, it's good. And I know you wish you had been able to listen to your aunt before. And I wish I had discovered this stuff more. And I wished that the kinds of things that were out there were the kind of things that I'm now doing and you're now doing. And so there's a lot of hope for the people out there. And I appreciate you adding to that, Felipe. So thank you for coming on, and we'll have you on again soon.
Thanks, Dan. See you soon. Right.
We'll see you soon. Well, that was a great pleasure having Felipe on. He's always got that energy towards becoming more powerful. He had it from the minute I first interacted with him. But the interesting thing about him, and something I take away from talking to him again, is the fact that he really understands using the mind-body experience to inform those powerful decisions. They were the things that guided him away from more traditional models of things. The body was what was telling him, hey, I'm not liking this typical school thing, or I'm not liking being stuck in more of an authority model with my parents. And it helped him to grow. So that's the main thing that I take away from the work that I've done with him, is that when he applied what was going on in his body and he understood it, he's one of these people who's been able to use the power column. That was the thing that really resonated for him when we talked, to be able to grow. And now he started his own podcast. He's taking his ideas in his own direction, an anthropological direction. And it sounds like an incredibly interesting podcast. So I encourage you all to check it out. We're going to have him back on again because his ideas about power and his unique ideas are not only something I'm interested in, but I like to show how powerful people can become when they start to accept the mind-body principles and how they apply to themselves. He's somebody who I would say is starting to accept his core narrative and become more powerful, the him that he wants to be, and it's great to see unfold. So thank you for watching. If you haven't already, click subscribe, hit like, ring the bell for notifications, and put your comments below. I will respond to you personally. I love the interaction from the community, so keep it coming.